Target destroyed.
The Panther tank was probably one of the best tanks used during World War II. Nevertheless, it showed up on the battlefield with a bunch of problems in the back. The Panther was one of the major weapon systems Germany was trying to develop, test and field. The main issue they faced was the fact that they were fighting knee-deep in a war with half the world. This stressed the German high command and led them to make very bad and hasted decisions with the Panther, which made it fall into a lot of problems even before it got to the front lines. Today we're gonna talk about what mistakes the German high command made, which led to all the problems with the Panther tank and eventually its very bad performance during the Battle of Kursk. And don't worry, I won't talk about the basic things such as the maintenance was hard and so on. And by the way, quick ad, you can now become a member of my channel and either just show your support or even become a decision maker and decide what videos I should make. As a colonel, you will also get access to 1 to 2 exclusive videos a month which only you can see. And on top of that, I will share any valuable information and documents I find on the internet during my research. Most of it is interesting, some of it is kinda terrifying, but it's definitely worth it considering the fact that some documents are like full books which you could read before going to sleep. And to all you War Thunder forum guys out there, I will not share any leaked documents, alright? I don't want to get into trouble. And regardless if you decide to become a member or not, you will get no disadvantages and I will keep making these videos as well as the YouTube community posts. So hello and welcome and enjoy this video. Now, new military equipment in general is most of the time developed to solve a problem and meet certain operational needs. The same applies to the Panther. In this case, it was developed to counter the Soviet T-34 tank. In October 1941, the first T-34s were actually used in battle. At the same time, Soviet tactics started to improve. One of the main reasons why the T-34 became such a big problem for the Germans was the fact that it was extremely easy for the Soviets to mass produce because it was very simple and standardized. Therefore, they could overrun the German tanks and there was rarely any shortage of T-34s. So until the appearance of the T-34, the Germans saw no reason to create a new tank. During peacetime, they had some ideas for heavier tanks which they put on paper, but none of them actually made it past the prototype stage. But the T-34's higher power-to-weight ratio, lower ground pressure, higher muzzle velocity and greater range was enough to shatter the idea of German armor superiority. The Germans continued fighting decisively, but they were in desperate need for better equipment or, well, more equipment. So the Germans sat together for some wurst and beer and thought of a solution. Initially, they thought it would be a good idea to just copy and paste the T-34 and make their own mass-produced version of it. But Heinz Guderian quickly realized that this wouldn't work because they didn't have the essential elements to mass-produce the T-34. And so came the final solution. Create the Tiger tank with a weight of 60 tons and create the Panther, a lighter tank of 35 to 45 tons. So once everything was clear, the design of the Panther went forward. For that, a Panther committee headed by representatives from the inspector of the Panzer troops set 2 requirements. First, the Panther needed to go into mass production by December 1942. This was very important, so it became the #1 factor. Second, the Panther needed to be, quote, superior quality to counter the numerical material superiority of the enemy, end of quote. However, today we know that the second requirement was a mistake. That's because after the Battle of Stalingrad, the Germans could never really build a tank which had good enough quality to counter the hordes of T-34s on the field. On May 11th, 1942, the committee made their choice in favor of Mann and chose their tank. 2 days later, the design was sent to the Mustache Man and he agreed with the decision but left some comments as well. He wanted to change the requirements in terms of armor. He wanted the frontal armor to be 100 mm instead of 80 mm and wanted all vertical armor to be 100 mm. In the meantime, the production numbers for the following May were fixed at 250 Panthers. In September 1942, production numbers for the spring of 1944 were set at 600 Panthers. When it came to actually deploying the Panther, Heinz Guderian warned everyone from doing that too soon. He stated, quote, "A lesson learned from the First World War had taught us that it is necessary to be patient about committing new weapons and that they must be held back until they are being produced in such quantities as to allow their employment in mass. In the First World War, the French and British used their tanks prematurely in small numbers and thereby failed to win the great victory which they were entitled to expect." End of quote. Therefore, Guderian tried to convince the Mustache Men to wait before deploying the Tiger tank. The Mustache Men agreed on using the Tiger in a secondary operation. But the result? Well, the first attack with the Tiger happened near Leningrad and it did not go well. The Tigers suffered heavy and unnecessary casualties and also lost the secrecy of their new tank. Following this defeat, Hans Guderian made his fears of the same thing happening to the Panther clear to just about everyone and their mothers. Unfortunately or fortunately, he was not able to convince the Mustache Man to not deploy the Panther yet. The risk of production running late was present, and if they were to get lost, the training had to suffer massively. And that was pretty much what happened. Panther battalions had a very hard time coming together as a unit. Oftentimes, they were also distracted doing other stuff besides training. In February 1943, for example, a group of 12 Panthers held firing demonstration for Albert Speer, who was Germany's Minister for Armament and War Production. Fact is, those crews had better stuff to do than demonstrating their guns. Stuff like training, for example. Considering the fact that the deployment date of these Panthers was just 5 months away and the crews still weren't really well trained, this decision was stupid. Besides the distractions, the Panthers which were rushed out of the factories also showed some serious problems. When Heinz Guderian visited some crews less than a month before the beginning of Operation Citadel, he found out that the Panthers had some real issues with the final drive and the engine. On top of that, out of 200 Panther tanks already produced, only 65 had been accepted as technically flawless. If you think these numbers are bad, wait until we talk about the actual battle losses. These and some other problems had to be fixed, so therefore some of the tank's components had to be sent back to the manufacturers. Other repairs were made at repair facilities. These problems led to the crews being taken away from their training vehicle. This shows how the crew training had suffered from the Panther being rushed through production. The majority of the crews didn't really have the chance to train 1 month before Operation Citadel. Therefore, companies and battalions also never really got to do any large-scale maneuvering or training exercises. They couldn't train with and test the current Panther tactics to best exploit the Panther's strengths and minimize its weaknesses. Neither could they exercise with or other equipment the Panther would be required to fight alongside with. This also meant that tactics couldn't be adjusted. This would have been very important considering the simple fact that it would be nice to actually know the vehicle and tactics one is planning to go to war with. At the end of June 1943, 2 Panther battalions were thrown on trains and sent to the Eastern Front. They arrived at their assembly area near the town of Kosacek on 3rd of July. The Battle of Kursk began on July the 5th. And as you might expect, 2 days are not enough for a unit to prepare an offensive. On top of that, on July 4th, the regiment was assigned to the Großdeutschland Panzergrenadier Division and Oberst Decker took control of the regiment. This was 1 day before the offensive, which means he barely had time to meet the staff, work out procedures, and get to know the tanks under his command to use its strengths and weaknesses to the fullest. Now, the Corps War Diary from July 2nd, 1943 said the following about the situation there. Deficiencies existed in the Panther units. They hadn't conducted tactical training as a complete. Uptime and radio sets hadn't been tested. Since their assembly areas were so close to the front, permission couldn't be granted for them to test and practice with the radio sets. Yep, that's not good. In terms of losses, the first losses didn't even come from battle. The first 2 Panthers were destroyed because the engine caught fire while unloading from a train. The fire was so bad, both Panthers were classified as total losses. But these were just less significant losses. The real losses, the actually embarrassing ones, came from actual battle. I'm not even going to bother presenting them to you nicely. I'm just going to read the exact date of the day and the number of Panthers which were operational. 5th of July, 184 Panthers still operational. 6th of July, 166 Panthers still operational. 7th of July, 40 Panthers still operational. 10th of July, 10 Panthers still operational. 13th of July, 43 Panthers still operational after maintenance crews managed to fix some of them. Yeah, I don't think I have to add a comment to that. The catastrophe is obvious, but you can see that after the first 2 days of battle, the Panther could not be used in masses again. Heinz Guderian wrote on the 10th of July the following, quote, "By the evening of 10th of July, there were only 10 operational Panthers in the front line. 25 Panthers had been lost as total write-offs. 23 were hit and burned and 2 had caught fire during the approach march. 100 Panthers were in need of repair, 56 were damaged by hits and mines, and 44 by mechanical breakdown. 60% of the mechanical breakdowns could be easily repaired and were on the way to the front. About 25 still had not been recovered by the repair service." End of quote. Another problem in the tactic was that the Panthers were placed at the lead spearhead of the wedge. This meant the Panthers were on the very front and the first ones to get hit by Soviet defense. Also, this placement didn't take advantage of the Panther's longer range. If it was placed more at the rear of the formation, the Panther could engage enemy targets while the enemies couldn't engage the Panther. The Soviets also quickly learned that overrunning the Panthers with hordes of T-34s and hitting them from the sides where the armor was thinner, they could more or less easily destroy or disable them. More problems arose when a Panther was damaged in the field and needed to be towed away. Firstly, the operational orders given to the tankers said that, quote, "In no circumstances will tanks be stopped to render assistance to those who have been disabled." End of quote. This means that other tanks were not allowed to help them. This was a problem because the typical tank retrieval equipment of that time was not strong enough to tow the weight of a Panther tank. The only thing able to pull a Panther was another Panther or Tiger, but these, quite frankly, weren't allowed to help. They kinda shot their own leg with that. Another issue was that because the Panther was rushed through production and training, the Germans had no clue which parts of the tank were more likely to break. You know, during testing and training, you see which parts break often and need replacement. But because very little time was spent operating the Panther during training, they had no idea which parts they would need, until they found out in battle. But by then it was too late, because they first had to tell the factories which parts they needed, they then needed to produce these first and then send them to the front. Anyways, that was all I had to say for today's video. I hope you enjoyed it. If you think I said anything that is not right or you think I should have added any additional information to this video, please let me know in the comments and share your knowledge. Besides that, thanks for watching and I'll see you in the next video.
Target destroyed.